Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of The Free Beacon. We are your morning show for any hour. We got a lot going on. There's the tragic story out of Georgia, which I've written about. We'll talk about that. Updates out of South Carolina and the 2024 race. We've got a great story in The Atlantic with tea about the New York Times, and we do want to talk about that. And some Dr. Phil on the show today, being super smart. We're excited about it. But before all that, how's it going, Vic?
Hello, Mary Catherine. I'm doing fine. Over the weekend, Kate's cousin and his family came over, and I figured, they always think, I should have like, what cocktail am I going to make for them, right? Because I'm known as the cocktail guy. When I go to their house, I'll make my Manhattans and things, but I wanted to change it up and do something interesting, but kind of surprisingly simple. So I made homemade whiskey sours, which is funny because you could actually go to the store and you see these mixes for all sorts of things. And I thought, it's actually not that hard to make, and all you need to make
Those mixes, by the way, will give you diabetes in one shot.
In one shot, exactly. So I made my own simple syrup. I haven't made it in a while, so it was time for me to re-up it anyway because it opens up for so many possibilities, margaritas and other things. So I did that, and it's really just, it's whiskey and simple syrup and lemon, and squeeze a lemon. You can even, drops of lemon in there and the lemon twist. You rub it on the glass and the usual deal. It is funny drinking it because it tastes nowhere near as sweet as the whiskey sours I remember from college.
Yes. I'm telling you, were drinking the ready-made stuff.
The stuff I ever see because, at the bars, they would reach behind, in the well, and they take out these plastic jugs.
The plastic bottles.
And with the little pourers on top, and they'd pour it, and then you drink it, and you say to yourself, this is the most amazing drink ever, along with the amaretto sour and the fuzzy navel. This is so good. So
I had a mudslide period.
Okay, this is my question, Mary Catherine. I don't want to say when you were not 21. I'm going to say
not.
when you were young, quote unquote, when you were young in college.
Right.
What was your drink?
Yeah, let's just call it young. So there was a mudslide period of time.
Okay, hold on now. A mudslide. This is it's like a milkshake, isn't it?
It's just a milkshake. It's just a chocolate milkshake with vodka in it.
Is that what it is? Really? It's vodka?
I think that's what it is.
Well, vodka goes ananywhere. Man.
I mean, what do I remember from those days? But no, so there was that. There were some more.
Who doesn't love that?
Honestly, mudslide you could get at a bar on one certain night in Athens, Georgia. You could go to this bar and they would serve you like a real milkshakey, like ridiculous thing. And it was cut rate. And I didn't have any money in college. So that was important. Go on like a Tuesday and have a mudslide.
Yeah.
There were some more bargain options that I indulged in from time to time. And when I mean bargain, I mean street corner stuff like Boone's Farm.
Wow.
And there was also, I don't know if you've ever tried Mad Dog 2020.
I have. I've had. I think it's called Cisco, which is like Night Train.
Similar vibe. Mad Dog 2020. There's, just to give you an idea of how heinous Mad Dog 2020 is, there is a flavor called Banana Red.
Okay, I get the banana part. So I'm afraid to find what the red part is.
It's just a red, like the drink is red, but it's banana flavored. I should Google that and see what they were intending to do. I mean, what they were intending to do is to get people drunk. That's what they.
Yeah. Fast.
So that's the shadier version. And then later in college, I did enjoy actually, and I know this is offensive now, an Irish car bomb.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess you're supposed to say a depth charge or something.
But other than that, I think just light beers. I wasn't really those were special occasion drinks, Vic.
Okay. All right. Understood. But that's pretty, I remember the mudslide because my sister, who was 3 years older than me, would tell me about it when she was in Rutgers. Like, oh my gosh, there's this drink called the mudslide. Must be popular with the ladies, but it's certainly if you went to TGI Fridays, you can get it there, obviously, or Ruby Tuesdays, and it's like this big concoction. And do they put you could put like whipped cream and stuff on it, right? I mean, it's like a party.
Oh yeah, no, it's. I'm sure in this day and age when they serve all the insane, like you could get it like the bacon and everything Bloody Mary, but a mudslide, I bet is what you can get.
It's like having a sundae or something, but it's pretty good because you get the alcohol, but you also get dairy.
Right.
And
It's
you need
important.
that. You need your calcium from the milk. I'll tell when I was quote unquote young, I would go to Mr. Smith's, which was a piano bar on M Street, which is no longer there. And I don't know how I got onto this, but I ended up with, oh, I remember I got a Tom Collins because a guy I knew, Bob King, a friend of mine who was older, he liked the vodka Collins, but the
Mhm.
original is the
Gin,
Tom Collins,
yeah.
which is gin. And I found it so tasty. And I'll tell you what, I was so excited whenever I was able to get served the Tom Collins that I drank out of the stir straw. I didn't know that that's a stir. I thought it was like a
I
real.
think
This is
that's
a really
okay.
small straw, man.
Tiny little straw.
Tiny,
It's
tiny.
it's for portion management. I love a Tom Collins. I like them sort of freshly made. I don't like the
Yes.
plastic jug. Don't give me that
No,
plastic jug.
this is what gives you the headache the next morning.
And honestly, sometimes because it is a more classic cocktail,
Hmm.
but it's not
Yes, it
very,
is.
it hasn't become trendy like
No,
old fashioned.
no.
Sometimes you order a Tom Collins and a bartender will look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That
Oh,
happens
really?
to me not infrequently,
Yeah.
I would say.
Like it's so
Um,
old school that the Collins thing throws him off now.
Yeah. And or they don't know what kind of glass to put it in.
Uh-huh.
It's usually in the tall, slim glass, which
Yeah.
is how we like it. It looks refreshing.
Yeah.
But no, they don't do that. By the way, I just want to note that Banana Red is still on the market.
Good
It
to
is-
know.
it is-
to
here's the-
avoid.
The description is sweet and tangy with all the smells and tastes of real banana. It is an American fortified wine.
Oh, like port. It's like port. It's a fortified wine.
But imagine drinking something red that tastes like banana. Why? Why did we
Right.
do this?
Because you wouldn't drink it if it was yellow.
Also,
I guess
j-
maybe that's what it is.
imagine drinking anything that tastes like banana. First of all, I don't like.
Oh,
banana.
I like.
So,
You know what? I like fake banana. I may
ooh,
have to check this out.
You're a fan of like banana runts, aren't you?
Banana
Remember
what?
runts? Remember
Runts?
runts?
Oh no, no, no!
It
but
was
I'll
a
have-
candy. It was
Oh,
a candy. It was a
really?
hard candy, and it was
I would-
banana shaped.
Oh yes, I've had that. It's not bad. The banana chips are great, and of course,
Ew.
what I miss is like Friendly ice cream back in the day from the Northeast. They would sell banana ice flavored ice cream, and it was that bright yellow, which you knew was not real. That's why it was so good. And now you
Right.
go to most places, banana flavored ice cream. That it's like they put real bananas in it. And I'm
Like,
like,
don't
hey,
do that.
why would
You're
you
messing
do
it up for
that?
me.
That's insane. How are you,
Anyway.
Mary Catherine?
All
Otherwise,
right. Well, I'm pretty good. I will tell just one brief
Yeah.
story, one success from my life yesterday,
Please.
which it so rarely happens, Vic. And actually, I don't cook all that much.
I see what we're.
I'm a medium competent
Okay,
cook, but I don't do it that often. Partly just because there's a lot of kids in this house,
sure.
and we kind of
You don't have that.
we kind of do
Yeah.
kid dinner. We throw that at them, and then Steve and I will have something, but it's not always something together. We do all convene at the same time usually, so
Okay.
we're all there.
Yeah.
It's just sort of hodgepodge.
We've been there.
I'm trying to get better at occasionally cooking something that everyone eats, right?
Okay.
Now, the babies are little, so that's not always going to be the case. The timing of their bedtime makes that difficult, right? So, but I'm trying to get in a little bit more of a rhythm. And so sometimes I will find recipes and try them out. Well, one off of Instagram for chicken shawarma came up, and
Wow.
I thought, well, this sounds pretty good to me, but sometimes things that sound good to me don't always work for the whole family.
Yes.
But it was a simple marinade of chicken, throw it in it was like Greek yogurt and cayenne and all the cumin and all the things, coriander, all mixed
My
up together.
goodness.
And you marinate it for
Yeah.
a couple of hours to overnight, and then you throw it in a sort of just a baking tin,
Uh-huh.
essentially piled up on itself. So it's like a street cart shawarma, right? When
Okay.
you cut through it,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
piled up on itself with all this gooey marinade all over it. Throw it in there for 50 minutes, pull it out, chop it up. I did so, and I handed it to all the members of my family.
Uh-huh.
And not only did no one refuse it, everyone actively enjoyed it.
That is, it is so gratifying as a cook when you have like everyone agreeing that this was great. It is a great feeling.
I was,
Congratulations.
I was moved. So we're putting that one on the list for regular eating.
And
Now,
you've
my-
also you are now accustoming them to
Yes.
familiarizing them with Mediterranean flavors, which is really good.
Oh my gosh, Mediterranean. If I
Yeah.
could choose a
Great.
genre for the rest of my life. Now, if I could choose a genre with no health effects, I would probably choose Southern. But
Yeah, I like the caveat there, the qualifier.
but if I could
because-
choose a genre
yeah,
period that I have to eat for the rest of my life, Mediterranean would be the choice.
I feel the same way. If I had to choose one cuisine for the rest of my life and it was healthy as well, I would say Chinese.
Yeah.
I'm just
Nothing fried
no,
there.
no, nothing there. MSG is it's good for you.
MSG is good for you. It's
Yeah.
just a supplement. Okay. Shall we get into the news a
Umami.
little bit?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Look, we're going to do a 2024 update because obviously South Carolina happened this
Yep,
weekend. I was
it
up in
did.
New York on NBC broadcast commenting on that. But before we get to that, can we please talk about the New York Times?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I actually don't know. I don't think I know Rubenstein personally, but I feel personally invested in Adam Rubenstein.
I don't think we overlapped at the Weekly Standard, but I'm friends with him. So please
Yeah.
continue.
So he was an editor at the New York Times at the moment of the conflagration of 2020, when famously, and I'm sure many of our listeners will know, but I'll briefly go over it, when famously the New York Times got an op-ed from Tom Cotton, a U.S. Senator from Arkansas, and Tom Cotton's op-ed said, hey, maybe we should consider using the U.S. military to help control what has not the protest part, but the part that has descended into riots and major damage of property to the tune of I think billions was what they added it up
that's right.
to eventually. And when that op-ed was published, it was considered such a transgression within the New York Times newsroom that anyone and everyone that had anything to do with it was pilloried in private on Slack, then publicly, as they dissected what went wrong when they published an op-ed by a U.S. senator. The answer is nothing. They just published an op-ed by a U.S. senator that a lot of people disagreed with on staff. A lot of Americans didn't disagree that much. A lot of people on staff disagreed. So everyone's pilloried. James Bennett, the then editor, took the fall. He was pushed out of his position. And our buddy, Adam Rubenstein, who was a young op-ed editor, was named as the person responsible for this op-ed while he was still employed at this place where everyone was being bullied for having anything to do with this op-ed. And now he's written his version of the story for The Atlantic.
Everything that you imagine, sort of, if you think you're crazy and think what life is like, inside within in the walls of the Gray Lady, right, in the New York Times, turns out to be true. And you think to yourself, no, it can't be this way. It can't be as crazy as everyone says or the people on the right say about the indoctrination and the whole woke thing and cancel culture. And then you see this revelation from Adam Rubenstein. And, two things. One, some people give him a hard time, Adam, for, wanting to work in a place like the New. Why would you ever want to work there? There was a time when I wanted to work at a lot of these institutions because, they had such a long history and legendary writers and amazing editors. But that was then, and this is now. And the more you see, the less now you would think, to yourself, I really want to go there. I mean, I never wrote for the New York Times. I wrote for the Washington Post on occasion, and I loved it at the time. And there were great people. There were great people there that I worked with, editors and all. And I don't feel that way now. And after reading this, I definitely have no desire to have anything to do with this.
So that's the question, right? Adam Rubenstein was feeling pleasantly surprised that he was welcomed at the New York Times in the first place. He had a right-leaning pedigree, although he certainly was not some firebrand, right?
No.
He came from the Weekly Standard, which was solidly Trump skeptical.
Late Weekly Standard too, yeah.
Yes, late Weekly Standard. He was a person who grew up reading the Times, understands this culture.
Right.
And he comes into the newsroom, and one of his first interactions is an icebreaker. And I'm going to run through that real quick.
Yeah.
The icebreaker, which the story opens with, of course, because it's too perfect, right?
Yeah, it's a great lead.
So on one of my first days at the New York Times, I went to an orientation with more than a dozen other new hires. We had to do an icebreaker, and he has to tell what his favorite sandwich is. He says, Russ and Daughter's Super Heapster came to mind, but I figured mentioning a $19 sandwich wasn't a great way to win new friends. So I blurted out the spicy chicken sandwich from Chik-Fil-A and considered the ice broken. The HR representative leading the orientation, this is the HR person, chided me We don't do that here. They hate gay people. People started snapping their fingers in acclamation. I hadn't been thinking about the fact that Chick-fil-A was transgressive in liberal circles for its chairman's opposition to gay marriage. Not the politics, the chicken, I quickly said, but it was too late. I sat down ashamed. Okay, that's
Yeah.
his intro.
It's Maoist. The whole thing about what these, you know what, the only thing they're missing are maybe little red handbooks on how to behave properly in a woke society. The snapping of the fingers thing.
Creepy.
Yeah. I mean, because the only thing weirder than that is apparently jazz hands, which they want people to do because otherwise it's ableist against the, I think.
Yeah,
the
I think
deaf.
or like people who have sensory issues. I think.
I get, you know, when I was I studied in Vienna for a year, and you know, when you have to deliver some sort of a, you know, a talk or whatever, a presentation, I had to do this in front of one of these big classrooms. At the end, they if they like it, they knock on the desks, is what the Germans and Austrians do. They just knock on the desks. So I guess that wouldn't be allowed here. That would be really triggering.
No, that would be a problem.
No, but it's like a bad leftist version of the game Telephone, where by the end, oh, we hate Chick-fil-A because, you know, they hate gay people. They don't serve gay people is another one. If you read some of the comments, people say how it sort of morphed into this. The founder and CEO of Chick-fil-A, right? He believes in the traditional definition of marriage, which, by the way, is what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton believe. And that wasn't that long ago. And suddenly we're all, again, it's very Orwellian. It's like, oh, we've always been at war against Eurasia or East Asia. Sure.
Yes. No, it's very creepy. It's creepy to live your life this way.
It's amazing.
And you're right. It's based on this just very mainstream view of the CEO that actually doesn't have a lot of anything to do with the chicken or the way he runs the company. Now, he does run the company from a Christian perspective. That is part of the deal.
Right. They're closed on Sundays.
This also, by the way, allows them to operate in a way that is closer to the values liberals claim to want to represent, which is that the franchise price is pretty low. If you adhere to the company's values and do a good job and give good chicken and good service, you will be able to move up in a way that, you know, you'd think people would be in favor of. But whatever, they're not. Okay. So that's his introduction. But to your point, Vic, about writing for places like this, what stands out to anyone here reading this is how little Rubenstein gets backed up by anyone in this organization. They did him so dirty, including like naming a lower level opinion editor in this very volatile news reporting about an op-ed that your newspaper has run. By the way, the news reporting was done by someone who on the Slack channel had said incredibly incendiary things about the op-ed. So maybe you shouldn't be reporting on this thing. And I was also struck by one of Adam's quotes in here, or one of the paragraphs in here, where he says, immediately the op-ed caused an outcry within the Times. Dozens of the paper's employees retweeted an identical or near identical statement workshopped on Slack that said, running this puts Black New York Times staff in danger. Okay.
Yeah.
He says, it was an outlandish claim, but next to impossible to rebut. How can you tell someone who says they're not safe that in fact they're fine? Did they know that in some states troops had already been deployed to protect public safety? Were we reading the same op-ed? Were they serious? This is an issue that I have with communicating with people, because I've been in Rubenstein's shoes, right?
Sure.
I've been the weirdo. I've been the only one at CNN, for instance, right? I'm pretty comfortable with that. But you get in these conversations where you're like, our understandings are so very different right now that I'm not sure how to communicate with you without saying you need to grow up and put your big girl boy non-gender normative panties on. Like
it's like they're from another planet, and they're getting, you know, all their news is from one side, not the other. And so when you bring these things up, they think it's completely, they think you're crazy. And the other thing is, of course, being triggered by feeling unsafe, right? That was the big thing. You have endangered your colleagues. They now feel unsafe. They didn't because of an op-ed. And really what they wanted to drill down was Cotton's reference to insurrection, right? And what it meant to be able to quell the riots? Did it mean you're going to kill them without
Well, that's what people claim erroneously
That's
about
right.
the op-ed is that it didn't make a distinction between
Yeah.
peaceful protesters and those engaged in crimes, and it did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, we can all acknowledge that policing in this way and bringing in the military
Mhm.
could have risks to otherwise peaceful protesters, right? We can all acknowledge that, but that's just a debate. That's just
Right.
a normal debate.
You can't have debate. That's the problem. This is what's upsetting to all these people is somebody is challenging their beliefs. By the way, and Adam brings this up, which is the same op-ed page. Senator Tom Cotton has an op-ed. They're bothered by that, but they're not bothered by op-eds from the Taliban, Vladimir Putin,
Nope.
a Chinese Communist Party official defending their actions in Hong Kong, and I believe the mayor of Gaza, the Hamas appointed mayor of
Yeah.
Gaza. So
NBD.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
as long as you're from the right side. And this is the thing and I've experienced this a little bit in various organizations. He also talks about how there's a different pipeline for right-leaning ideas.
Yes.
So they don't go through the same process. And by that, I mean, it's much stricter.
Yeah.
Right? The process that conservative-leaning columns or heterodox views went through for the op-eds was much harder. And I've experienced this in my own life where I'll write for a publication that seems like a good publication to write for, and then I get so put through the ringer.
It's not.
Such that, and look, I love a good fact check. In fact, The Atlantic has fact checked me before on my own personal narrative, and I do not mind it because I want to get the story right?
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
good. But there is a point, especially with op-eds, when you're like, to some degree, I have to be able to, within the facts, express an opinion, and that part alone can be too much for an organization that does not have these opinions around. They think they're like, you have to substantiate your opinion.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I want to get the facts right, but I need some leeway here. And they don't offer that in some places.
Well, and the thing is, because a lot of times what we think of as opinion, for them, they believe it as fact. It is fact that there's more than, two genders. It is fact that, abortion is great or whatever it is. I mean, they don't think of themselves they think of themselves oftentimes as being somewhere in the center.
Oh God.
And then,
yes,
I mean, they don't, because it's understood. Of course, the idea of marriage between just a man and a woman is insane, and not acknowledging that there are a lot of people who religiously, believe that. That's one thing. And the other thing, of course, is how when they turned on Adam, one of the things was how people are saying, oh, I heard you wrote the op-ed.
Yeah.
And then and he's trying to say, no, I didn't. But then he has to refer people to legal about this because they're reporting on the story. And the higher ups, as you were mentioning, it's all cowardice. So the younger people believe it, and the older people are afraid to go against them. And this was the result. They didn't have Adam's back. They tried to say nice things. And he wouldn't name a columnist, not a conservative, but another columnist who says, so when a majority of people in our organization don't like my column, are you going to have my back too? And, it's a good question because it's just fear.
He also notes a diplomatic correspondent, Edward Wong, wrote in an email to colleagues that he typically chose not to quote Cotton in his stories because his comments, quote, often represent neither a widely held majority opinion nor a well thought out minority opinion. Now think about the bubble that this person is in and how he evaluates what is a well thought out opinion, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely different standard from the ones that he agrees with, which becomes a self-perpetuating vicious cycle of bubble life, right? Okay. Can I also just add this? I know we're on this for a while, but it's indicative of the whole problem with media.
And I have one thing as well, so go ahead.
So in the wake of this, there has been a debate, because this is what we can debate about. There's been a debate about whether the Chick-Fil-A incident ever happened.
Oh.
Because people like Nicole Hannah-Jones and others have been arguing with Meghan McArdle, another journalist at the Washington Post, a libertarian-leaning writer there, that this anecdote seems like it couldn't have happened. Seems fake. Didn't happen. All right. Look, again, I've been in a lot of liberal newsrooms, and I absolutely think this could have happened.
Yeah.
I think that Adam Rubenstein is not a fabulist.
Yeah, I believe that.
I think The Atlantic does fact checking as I have experienced, even telling my own story, right?
Yeah.
Which is what he's doing. Also, the group of people saying this couldn't happen, if you put them in a room and I walked in and I said, hey guys, I brought lunch and I pulled out Chick-Fil-A, they would have at least a mini panic attack, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do? Do I eat the chicken? Do I have a discussion about how to eat the chicken? Do I need to put context with the
Yeah.
chicken? Like, the idea that this is out of bounds in a liberal newsroom is batshit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
You're the people.
Yeah.
You're the people who do this.
Again, it's rules for thee, but not for me. And in their mind, everything is normal, and you people are crazy.
Also,
And,
it's like the Maoist thing too, to come at this anecdote
Yeah.
and say, absolutely, that could never happen.
Right.
That could never happen in our world where we all completely agree with each other and punish each other for not agreeing. Sure.
It's the one thing that really bothers them is ideological diversity. By the way, if I was asked my favorite sandwich, I would have probably said your classic foot-long Italian sub, and then I would have done a whole Italian impression. I hope,
good for
yeah.
you.
Oh,
yeah.
I hope that I'm sure that would have won over.
Well, see, that's good because you're not visibly Italian. So
they wouldn't know what to make of it.
They wouldn't know what to do.
They're confused. Yes.
I would pick. Mine actually is a little highfalutin. Mine is called the Surfside.
Oh.
And it's served at Jetty's, which is a very small chain in DC.
Yeah, it's very small.
And it comes with roast turkey, the whole seed mustard, avocado, crispy bacon on sourdough.
That sounds lovely.
It is really good.
Have you ever gone to Bowie Mongers?
I haven't been to Bowie Mongers.
That's a sandwich place. You can their tuna salad is good. You know what it's called? The Tuna Turner. It's true.
Would Tina find that offensive? I don't know.
I would want a salad named that. It's very curb your enthusiasm. I want a sandwich named after me. Come on. Okay.
That's true. All right. Anyway, our best to Adam Rubenstein, who's off to other and better things.
Great guy.
Writing various places, being an editor of actual diverse ideas and doing what he's good at. So I'm glad for him. I have felt for him since he was named, but I appreciate him turning it into an object lesson in what is wrong with basically all of media and perhaps why no one's paying money for media anymore.
Who needs this?
Oof. All right. We got some 2024 updates. Let's start with Trump's legal issues first. I just want to note the insanity of the cycle we're in and the bad behavior of, once again, Trump's adversaries. Not only is Fani Willis making a fool of herself down in Georgia, but in New York, we have Letitia James, who is the DA there.
Attorney General.
AG there. Tweeting repeatedly every day how much Donald Trump owes on the fine that he was issued in the civil fraud case. Remember, this is the civil fraud case that even the AP had to concede, hey, we haven't really seen this law used this way before, and he didn't really seem to defraud anyone. Nonetheless, he's charged some $400 million to $500 million bucks, and there's interest on it every day.
Yep.
He has to pay before he can appeal, which seems odd to me. And she's now just tweeting the total triumphantly that he owes them
every day.
What are we doing?
I'm so glad that she's striving to not be seen as sort of, going after her political opponents. No, she's not even pretending. And I'm not even sure if those interest assessments are correct, but the people on her side are definitely loving it because it's like, we're getting up to $500 million, maybe more. And the whole point is to bankrupt him. We must do everything we can to, again, remove him from this election and make sure he's never elected again. This is not a way, if you feel strongly about it, that's really not the best way to do this in the name of democracy. And we mentioned this, on previous shows that, on day one, her goal was to get him on something. And that's, that was her goal. There's a lot of other problems that New York is going through right now, but let's focus on Donald Trump. What they would love nothing more than for, banning him from doing business. They would love nothing more than for him to give up one of his properties like Trump Tower, and then they can tape down the sign and it'll be like the toppling of Saddam statue.
Oh my God. Yes, people in the streets.
They want it like that. Yeah, this is what they're hoping for. Again, and we're talking about a crime with no victim. It wasn't filed by an injured party. The banks made money in something that other businesses do. We shouldn't be fine with this.
No. It's gross. It's bad.
Yeah.
You're making an unprecedented, weird, like driving toward
Yeah.
a constitutional crisis situation worse. But that's what they want. I mean, speaking of the Atlantic, there was a piece in the Atlantic this week just saying, hey, have we ever thought about like if Trump won, Democrats could not certify him on January 6th. And I'm like, what are you guys doing?
It's full circle.
It's like you just insurrection for the right reasons. It's bad. It's bad, guys.
That's right. Oh, and this, by the way, this goes also, this connects with an Adam Rubenstein's piece in the Atlantic, because he talked about how one side is about, stealing the election, and the other side is election denialism.
Oh, yeah.
So one is good and the other is bad.
They just see it as like, even though and this is actually, this reminded me of my experiences as well. Adam, because he's heard both sides and is rationally thinking in sort of center, frankly, center right, he can recognize where these two sides are spinning out and in similar ways. And he points out, hey, when you guys talk about voter suppression being this huge issue, it kind of sounds like the rhetoric of the voter fraud crowd.
Right.
And they're like, oh, no, ours is totally real and theirs is totally fake. That's how that works.
That's how they think.
It is. But the power of somebody like Adam to recognize these parallels is actually very important for a newsroom, but they hate it.
No. And this is all stemming from now going back to college, because there's no more sort of the ability to have critical debates.
No.
It's not happening.
Or like if you stick your neck out and have a debate and disagree, you end up like Adam, right? Yeah. That's the award you get. Okay. So things are not great for Trump in the courts or in the fines area, but he did win pretty dominantly in South Carolina. I don't want to discount that it's like a 20-point win. However, it's both strong and weak, right? Because there's still 40-ish%, I think a little less than that in South Carolina, that are sufficiently not all in on Donald Trump. And this has been an issue with his candidacy the entire time he's been a candidate. Now, a lot of those people will come home, right?
That's the question.
But a lot of those people might not.
Right.
And a lot of the people who used to be those people are now Democrats.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's the question, Mary Catherine, is, do her supporters fall in line and sort of, extrapolate from that? Because, I've seen numbers just from South Carolina where it's Nikki supporters, 59%, say no, they're not going to support him. And another 36% just in the state of South Carolina who say that they won't vote for Trump if he ends up getting convicted of a felony. And again, this is not to say that he's obviously, he's the presumptive nominee. We know that.
Right.
Obviously, he's on his way. He's cruising.
Yeah,
he's cruising to the nomination. But these voters are going to be needed in the general. And he's got serious money problems. The small donors, the small donor amounts are dwindling. And we talked about his fines. It's not good. And I don't know if we're, are we really sure this is who we want to go against Joe Biden?
Well, as I noted on NBC, the math is not mathing for Nikki Haley, right? There's but I understand the rationale to say I'm still in this race. I have delegates.
Yeah.
You don't know where this guy's going to end up by the time this process is through. However, her having delegates doesn't necessarily guarantee that the delegates themselves, when faced with a weird situation, would say, well, obviously she's the choice. They might not do that at all, right? So we are in a very strange situation. Some noted, and we'll play a little bit of her speech after South Carolina.
Everyone wants to bring back the America we know and love. That's the underlying message of what happened today. I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory. And I want to thank the people of South Carolina for using the power of your voice. America will come apart if we make the wrong choices. This has never been about me or my political future. We need to beat Joe Biden in November. I don't believe Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. I said earlier this week that no matter what happens in South Carolina, I would continue to run for president. I'm a woman of my word. I'm not giving up this fight when a majority of Americans disapprove of both Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
By the way, Trump's was pretty tame. He didn't
Yes.
go after her in any sort of mean way, even though it was her home state, right?
Yeah, I think he took his meds. So
So Nikki Haley gives a speech that sounds a little bit like it could be a third party pitch, right?
Yeah.
Sound a little bit like that?
yeah, I mean,
No.
she's been denying it, but you
Mhm.
know,
No Labels has still been looking for someone
Yeah.
to fill that role. They have ballot access in not really that small a number
Right.
of places.
but
I think
it's
the
not Joe
number-
Manchin. We know that, and it's not Larry Hogan.
It's not going to be Joe Manchin. It's not going to be Larry Hogan. So they're looking for someone. I added up the delegates the other day in the states where No Labels has, or electors in the states where No Labels have access. It's over 100.
Yeah.
Now, winning a state is not easy, but
Yeah.
winning a state when everyone does not like either of the other
Yeah.
candidates might be possible. So, but Jim Garrity at National Review notes that even if she were to appear as the No Labels candidate, it might be hard for her to do that because in places like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, something called sore loser laws would prevent someone from coming out of the major party and refiling in this way. Now, I'm sure No Labels has a lot of money for lawyers, and they could make the argument that they could do this.
I'm not
Now-
even sure if they have a lot of money, but
Well, they have figured out a lot of ballot access, so they
Yeah.
have money for that. They
Mhm.
have some staffing for that. The third party thing to me, again, Nikki Haley is not suggesting she's doing any of this. It just sounded a little like it in the
Yeah.
speech. The third party thing to me is undercovered because the amount of difference that could make
Yeah.
in a small number of states would not need to be much. And if you see polling where the third party candidates are added, things get much worse for Biden, not for Trump.
yeah, definitely worse for Biden, particularly between RFK and Cornel West. I mean, it matters. All those little bits matter, and Trump's margin does increase. You're right.
Speaking of Cornel West, can I note a very disturbing thing? This is a content warning for
Uh-oh.
those who are listening with younger folks. Before I get started, Cornel West tweeted in support of the self-immolation
Oh,
of the airman, the U.S. Air Force airman, who has now died of his injuries sustained outside the Israeli embassy, where he set himself on fire in protest of, quote, genocide, and yelled "Free Palestine." Cornel West was like full-throatedly praising his bravery. So that might have an effect on his support in third-party runs. However, and I know Twitter's not real life, but a disturbing number of liberal, like Free Palestine
right.
types have praised him,
Oh, yeah.
have praised this action. And
It doesn't surprise me. But
a society that valorizes self-immolation is
Immolation,
not
yeah.
a society that is going down the right path.
yeah, he's not exactly one of these Buddhist monks, you know.
Ooh, like it's
But I mean, and they're insisting that he was fine, and he, you know, that he was completely normal and just believed in the cause enough to make a
this
statement.
wasn't a mental health issue.
No. It's
There
the
was
first
also-
I've heard of the I don't know how often this happens, but the only other time I can think of somebody self-immolating in protest was during the Vietnam War, right? And
Yeah.
it was in front of at the Pentagon, and it was a man who brought a baby with him, which was crazy.
Oh my
But
gosh.
he lit himself, and I think McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, Robert Mack, I think he saw it. And yes, there are people who are not well.
Speaking, and also just like adding to the not wellness, the liberal white ladies on Twitter, ooh, baby. There's two examples in this conversation where one, somebody at some point, again, valorizing this, said, rest in power.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the
And
phrase.
then the white liberals, particularly the women, came at the person who said rest in power and policed that speech because you're not valorizing this self-immolation in the correct liberal way because rest in power is reserved for people of color, particularly
Yes.
the Black community. And so you shouldn't do that. So they're policed over that. You could set yourself on fire for their cause and you're still going to get told not to eat Chick-fil-A sandwiches. Like it is.
No, it's again,
It's wild.
It's Orwellian because, you know, the language, it's very important, the language that you use for them.
And then another lady noted in a long thread, again, glorifying this act, that, hey, not a lot of y'all Israel supporters have self-immolated, so seems like our side might be more righteous. And I was like,
Oh,
what are we doing?
yeah.
What are we doing? Okay.
And meanwhile, by the way, can I just say this, not to throw you a curveball, while this is
Yeah.
happening and Trump and has his issues and Nikki Haley is floundering, Joe Biden gets to go on Seth Meyers' show, late night show, and eat ice cream. And while he's eating ice cream at an ice cream shop, he's asked about the Middle East, and he talks about how he thinks they're really close to a ceasefire right now. And he's really hopeful, not about the hostages, because, I'm sure they're going to, there will always be hostages. I mean, whose fault is that?
Right.
And he's doing it while he's eating ice cream, and Seth Meyers is nodding along like, oh, this man's amazing. That's what we're dealing with here. I mean, it's all horrible. It's all
By the way,
horrible.
his public pushing while eating ice cream for such a ceasefire and for a really bad deal for Israel without, just would allow Hamas to do a ton of stuff and get hardly any hostages back up, which, by the way, they don't even know are alive, has turned Israel to say, like, publicly, no, we ain't doing this, man. You need to chill with that. So everything's going fine is my point. By the way, I saw somewhere tweeted or reported that, like, the president's staying up late for this late night show. No, he's not.
They don't tape it. They don't tape it at 11:30 or 12:30.
They tape it 4. It's like, come on, guys. This is well within his window.
Yeah.
All right. Can we? This is also a sad story. So just if you got kids listening,
and this is closer to home for you.
Yeah, and it also includes some media lying, which I know won't surprise you. I wrote about for FoxNews.com and Outkick.com the brutal murder of Laken Riley, a 22-year-old former UGA student who had become a nursing student at Augusta University. She went for a run last Thursday morning, and I think her roommate or friend reported that she wasn't back from her run after several hours. It was a morning run, and her body was found by the intramural fields at University of Georgia around Lake Herrick, which is obviously tragic all on its own. It's weird when one of these stories hits you in this way, because I ran that trail every week of my college career. I know exactly where she was. I know exactly how safe it feels to be there. And there was a reason it felt safe, because there hasn't been a homicide at the University of Georgia in 30 years. So she was just out doing her thing and encounters, allegedly, Jose Antonio Ibarra, 26, of Venezuela. He is in the country illegally. He crossed the border in 2022 in El Paso. He crossed the border the same month that, by the way, Kamala Harris was saying on TV that the border was secure. He is released into the interior of the country, goes to New York with a wife and stepson. And while he's there, he's arrested for driving unlicensed, unregistered vehicle with a child in it, and charged with child endangerment. He's put in jail. He's released very quickly, because that's how New York does it. He's allegedly going to have an asylum claim adjudicated at some point, but we all know how this works. You just come in and you hang out.
Do whatever you want to do.
You do whatever you want to do. So New York releases him before ICE gets a detaining order for him. So he's not dealt with at that point. He goes down to Georgia. He leaves his wife and stepson, goes to Georgia, to Athens, Clarke County, which is another sanctuary city, joins up with his brother, Diego Ibarra, who has, I think, 3 arrests to his name. But the thing about a sanctuary city is that those don't matter, right?
Yeah.
Your arrests don't matter.
No, we're protecting you from a worse crime, which is your being apprehended.
Yes, that you have to escalate to something truly intolerable to be actually held. So that's what happens with Jose. When he comes down from New York, he allegedly encounters this young woman and murders her. Now, a bunch of people on the left they throw at you the aggregate stats about immigrant communities and how they can be largely law-abiding once they get here. And I'm willing to rationally look at these numbers.
Yeah.
I'm willing to be rational about the fact that random violent crimes like this are not super common, right? However, we're not going to get rid of all violent crime by getting rid of illegal immigration. But the question is, when is murder preventable?
Yeah.
In the case of a young woman being murdered by an illegal immigrant, it was preventable several times.
Yeah.
When he crossed the border and when each time he offended after that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's sad, Mary Catherine, is her death is sad, but even sadder are the Republicans who are exploiting her death to bring up
Yes.
the border supposed
To bring up the
crisis.
facts about her
Yeah,
case. Yes.
that's really what, and that's an actual headline from the news.
Yeah.
And the other one, as you know, is from the Associated Press, which insisted that the real story here
Mm.
was, her murder allegedly by this quote unquote Athens resident brings to light the dangers of women going on solo runs.
Jogging while female.
Yes.
Vic.
Alone while female. That's the issue here. And the same thing with,
Mm-hmm.
is it Molly Tibbetts previously also who was killed by another resident, another human.
Well, this is how you know they're just lying to you.
Yeah.
This isn't bias. In the story about dangers to female joggers, they bring up Laken Riley and Molly Tibbetts, killed in Iowa in 2018. Similar
Right.
story, college student out for a run, she disappears. What they don't mention in either case is that both of one is an alleged murder, the other is serving a life sentence, both illegal immigrants.
Yep.
So you've used a sample size of 2,
Mhm.
and you've not managed to find the common thread because you're lying.
The common thread is they're human, Mary Catherine. They're residents of somewhere.
You know what? I think the common thread is toxic masculinity.
Yeah. Oh,
Vic.
we'll get to that on another show. Don't get me started.
Oh,
It's very disturbing because my question is, you're convinced this isn't biased. They're actually lying. But I do wonder when they run headlines and stories like this, is it because they feel compelled that they must protect, Democrats and president from being blamed for, what's happening at the border? Or are they just genuinely clueless, woke, and brainwashed straight out of college?
I think it's a combination of things. I think there's a lot of people, I said it the other day, and I know it sounds hacky, but I think it's true. A lot of people are taught to reflexively lie for an ideology, and they have not been taught how to actually think through any of this.
Right.
Right. And they've not been taught that the facts are important. They've been taught that the wrong facts can give power to the wrong people.
Yes.
And they don't like that. So
Right.
they don't want you to have a conversation about this.
There are greater forces at play here, Mary Catherine, like the
price of
oppressors.
progressivism. The price of progressivism is that you're going to break a few eggs in this omelet, I guess.
That's right.
But I tell you who is talking about it. The UGA community is talking about it. The state of Georgia is talking about it. All of those voters who are parents of UGA students are talking about it. By the way, someone was held at gunpoint this week in Athens as well.
Mm-hmm.
The crime problem is the same as it has become in a lot of liberal centers.
Yeah.
And they're not happy about this. And they're not going to ignore all of the reasons it could have been prevented. By the way, they had a memorial service for Laken and another student who died by suicide the same week, Wyatt Banks, just yesterday in the Tate Center, on the huge Tate Student Center area outside Sanford Stadium. It was packed with students, and those students' lives are changing. Like they're getting a taste of their own mortality and a real uncomfortable, life-changing moment to have in your 20s. And I've watched the poor best friend of Laken Riley, who was her roommate, who ran half marathons with her and hung out downtown. And these are all the things I did as a student. And I look at my life now, it is so tragic that it happens to so many young people. This young woman will not live any of the lives that I have lived from those from my mudslide days to now. Right?
Yeah.
She doesn't get those years.
Right.
And it could have been stopped. She was failed.
Yeah, I mean, they're not letting this guy go now, but it was a terrible price that had to be paid in order to get to this point. You mentioned Kamala Harris saying the border is secure. And of course, Alejandro Mayorkas had also said similarly that he didn't think there was a crisis. The border is secure. Joe Biden was recently asked about, is there a border crisis? And he said, of course. He goes, I've thought that for the last 10 years. So which is it? And by the way, it is Trump's fault. So,
Anyway, my heart goes out to the UGA community. It's been a rough one for that campus and to all of her friends and family. And I know that she's not just a political football. Like this is part of the story, but she is also part of the story and the life that she doesn't get to live. So I just want to honor that as well as much as possible, while also dealing with the facts. I know we have to get you out of here,
Oh,
Vic. Can we briefly say?
Oh, you want to? Do you want to just?
Well, because I
You
have to
gotta
leave
go.
too. I have to leave too.
Okay.
Can you tell me what you think of Shane Gillis on SNL?
Okay. I had my concerns, as an Asian American, see how he would do.
I love it.
Yes, I have to tell you, because of his hatred of Chinese food, which is questionable, but it does still taste good. And MSG is a good thing. But I saw his monologue. Now, you like that. I saw the skit he did, the pre-taped skit of Limo Emu, which quickly turns, I don't know if we have a audio of that or something, but there is some profanity. But
it's so dark and good.
It is so dark and good. And it turns the buddy cop thing into Training Day, basically. Or there's a scene from LA Confidential like this as well, where Russell Crowe puts the spare gun into the other guy's hand to make it look like he's shot. So that it's funny. Check that out, that particular skit. But he does talk. He was clearly nervous because the first thing he says is he got fired, and please don't look into that right now. Please stop.
Don't Google
find out
that.
what happened. So he was very sheepish and earnest about it. And I think he was genuinely nervous. And he started making various jokes and had to stop and say, look, this is all I got for this kind of this is the only kind of material I have for like this kind of an audience here on national television. But one of the things he did, which was a little bit edgy, the first thing was, being his mom's best friend. And he's equating that to being like your mom's gay best friend.
I laughed out loud.
It's very good.
When you're a little boy, you're just gay for your mom. Like,
gay for your mom.
Girl, let me hear your stories.
And dance for your mom,
Listening to Shania Twain.
It's just adorable and true. But the other thing is, he talked about, he was making jokes about Down syndrome because he has a niece who has Down syndrome, his sister's daughter. Same thing. My sister's daughter has Down syndrome. So I was able to relate to that. It is edgy territory because you're not sure. You feel like, the way I'll make occasional Asian jokes, you feel like by association that, I have this blood relative of mine, this niece of mine, that you can say certain things that might not be politically correct with somebody. And he openly, I think he says retarded is what he uses that term. And it's funny because he goes out there, people get nervous, and then he makes usual jokes that turns it around at his expense, but he can still get away with some of the stuff. And it's actually quite touching if you watch that monologue. It is a great thing to have. It's true. He was talking about how people don't know how to relate to others, family members, or people. If you don't have anybody, close to you who has Down syndrome, it is hard to, you don't know what to do. And I remember as a kid, every now and then you would encounter somebody with Down syndrome. I'd get nervous. I didn't know what to say, how to act. I don't know what that's all about. And it's been for my children, it's been a blessing to have, their cousin around and to be around them and playing and loving and understanding that they're just like us, and you don't have to, there are challenges they have clearly, but they're not how I was, which is nervous around them. This is family. This is, you're just the way you are.
It's life affirming to talk about those you love who have these challenges. And when you let art sort of be complicated and interesting, as Shane Gillis is, you have moments like that. And that's what I think the doctrinaire left has trouble with, and it's actually making art pretty boring sometimes. Please see the late night comedy shows. All right, I know we got to get you out of here.
Well, thank you, Mary Catherine, for that. And I just want a quick call out to listener Eric Varga, by the way, who reposted a tweet from that great Super 70s sports poster person about Canada had a version of We Are the World, and it's mesmerizing. And the song is called Tears Are Not Enough.
Is Anne Murray there?
Yes, she is. She's the first person I recognize. And Neil Young is there. And supposedly Paul Schaefer. That was all the people we could name. So you'll have to, our Canadian listeners will have to fill us in on that. I'm talking to you, Ian Brody. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MKHammer, at MKHammerTime on Instagram. And by the way, I'm so boring, mom style, that I was at the NBC studios while Shane Gillis was preparing to go on air. And I was so tired, I went back to my hotel room instead of trying to wheedle my way into the SNL studios, which is what I should have done. I should have been laughing out loud in that studio audience. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.